And as the federal coalition is negotiating its policy, a new report shows Australians are more concerned than ever about climate change. It's the annual Climate of the Nation report done by the Australia Institute. It reveals more than 80% of people want coal-fired power phased out. Let's bring in Richie Merzian, his climate director at the Australia Institute. Richie, talk us through the numbers of this year's Climate of the Nation benchmark report. How does it compare to years gone by? Is there an increase in concern?
The Australia Institute's been running this report with the Climate Institute for almost 15 years. What we've found is there's an all-time level of concern, an all-time high. 75% of Australians are concerned about climate change, and the intensity of that concern has increased. About 40% are very concerned. That's almost doubling over the last few years. And there's some impacts in particular that are highly concerning, like more bushfires, more drought, more species loss as well. Alongside that concern, we're also seeing greater appetite, a greater desire for policies that actually reflect climate action, not just in the long term for 2050, but also short-term action as well.
Is there any awareness, though, on whether people are willing to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, if it does increase costs for power bills or whatever else?
Well, the good thing is in the last few years, the economics have changed to the point where people now recognize that renewables are the cheapest form of new electricity. Solar has constantly ranked as a top energy source that's desired by people, and 7 out of 10 Australians are saying that they want to electrify their homes, get off gas. 7 out of 10 are saying that they want to electrify their vehicles. So there's a strong appetite for individual action and a growing recognition that that might not actually cost. There's certainly a role for governments to play with incentives, but we're also seeing that desire to move forward in and of itself. And if we look at the broader public policy, 63% of Australians now want a renewable powered recovery from the pandemic in terms of a source for investment. Only 12% want gas and the gas-fired recovery. So if we think about what public policy should be put on the table, we're seeing a lot more appetite for a green recovery.
We're seeing that in some governments. Certainly the New South Wales coalition government is of that view, including the new Premier, Dominic Perrottet. The federal government, though, still in these talks ahead of the climate conference in Glasgow. My colleague Andrew Clennell, reporting this afternoon at the Energy Minister Angus Taylor, has told MPs that they're not looking at a medium-term target change for 2030 or 2035, but merely a projection. How will that be received internationally, in your view?
A projection will be received poorly. It's just a guesstimate of where things will go. And if there's any indication, Australia's projections have been wrong significantly over the last 10 years, constantly projecting emissions would be higher. That's why probably the New South Wales government didn't just project that it'll reduce emissions by 50% this decade. They locked it into a target. That's what the UK, that's what countries will want to see. Australia actually bringing fresh targets to the table. And the focus is not on 2050.
As part of the national determined contribution, or the NDC as they call it, can you have within an NDC, which is what the language they use in those talks, can you have a projection within that?
No, an NDC, a nationally determined contribution, which is what countries need to put on the table, needs to be a target. It needs to be something your government is promising to deliver, not something your government thinks might happen. That's the real difference. The US has pledged and put a target of halving emissions. The UK 68% cuts, the EU 55% cuts. That's what our allies, our like-minded countries, other developed countries are doing. They're putting forward concrete promises, not just projections for where they hope things will go. And on top of that, there is a strong focus on moving away from coal. And our report shows 82% of Australians want to see coal phased out, and 66% of Australians want a ban on new coal mines. So there is that additional step, which is an immediate impact to actually phasing out fossil fuels.
Richie Merzian, Climate Director at the Australia Institute, thank you. Appreciate your time.